This podcast was recorded on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation.
Hello and welcome to the very first episode of The Real Story. I'm Joe Hildebrand. This week, the $300 question. Why can't the government means test its payment on electricity bills? And the same-sex book ban that has got the whole nation tying itself in knots. First up this week, you have to take it because it's good for you, the federal budget. Now, I spent about 6 hours locked up with this budget, which is longer than many marriages last, and I've got to say, it's pretty boring. But boring doesn't mean bad. In fact, this budget needed to be boring in order to do what it was supposed to do, which is nothing. So we have got a situation where inflation is still running way too hot, to the point where the Reserve Bank has gone from saying, yeah, we're definitely going to cut rates, to we might even have to raise rates. Of course, the RBA never says that, but everyone around the RBA says that. So there's a fear that not only will rates not come down, they certainly won't come down, it seems, before the beginning of next year. And some people have even suggested recently that they might have to go up again if inflation doesn't come down. And so this budget can't do anything that is going to put inflation up, which means that it can't really spend. But of course, people are struggling. People are being crushed by rising cost of living expenses. And what does that mean? It means they need relief. And what does relief look like? It looks like spending. And so the government has to do something. It has to provide relief and it has to provide spending to provide that relief. So it has to do two things at once. It has to say, look, here's some money for you to help you out, to make sure that you don't actually get crushed by rising energy costs, for example, which is one of the big drivers. But you can't think you've got money. So we're going to give you money, but you can't act like we've given you money. We want you to thank us for giving you the money. And remember, we gave you money when you go to vote for us next time. But we don't want you to behave as though we've just given you money. So you don't go and spend that money somewhere else, which would then force inflation back up again. So how does the government do this? Well, it's got to provide relief on energy bills, which are going through the roof, as it did last time round. But it can't actually put money in people's pockets like it did with, say, the GFC and the big cash splash. Hey, everybody, get a plasma! Because that's the last thing it wants people to do. It wants Australians to think they are poor, to think they don't have any money. And for most Australians, that's not a problem because they don't have any money. So you don't want it to look like a bonus. But you do want people to know that you're doing it because, of course, when the government does anything, it wants everyone to know it's doing it so it gets re-elected sometime in the next 12 months. It'll probably be in the first half of next year and not the end of this year, as some people are saying. He's not going to use it to go to an early poll, I can promise you that. So what does the government do? Well, it says to the energy companies, we want you to take this money off the bill before it gets to the consumer. So your bill comes down, but there's never a sort of point where you've even got a voucher in your hand that you can then punch into your service provider and get your discount. So the discount comes to the consumer, to the household, to the family, already baked into the bill. Now, this is important for a couple of reasons. One is, as I've said, it means that the consumer knows they're getting a discount because the government's shouting it from the rooftops, but doesn't have the money in their hot little hand. So doesn't think, oh, I just got this bonus $300 or this bonus $75 every 3 months. I can now go and spend it elsewhere. But it also raises another point, which people have been jumping up and down about all week. They're saying, oh, this isn't fair. Why is this money going to millionaires? Why are millionaires getting it? And then it's not just the crazy trotty left that are saying, why are all the millionaires getting it? It's also the right. The right is saying, oh, look at this cash splash by the Albanese government, spending like a drunken sailor, handing out $300 to Gina Rinehart and Clive Palmer and Malcolm Turnbull. Why aren't they means testing it? Now, these are the same people who were saying that millionaires like Gina Rinehart and Clive Palmer and Malcolm Turnbull should get an extra $4,500 tax cut. And now they're whinging about them getting a $300 discount on their power bill. Now, I'm a big fan of means testing. Generally speaking, I love it. I've been a beneficiary of it because for most of my life, I was poor as shit. So thank you very much, means testing. More money for me, less money for the millionaires. There is just one little catch, though, if you actually think about it. And anyone who's listened to what I just said before might have already twigged why you can't actually mean test this $300 payment. Because it's the power companies that are doing the discount. It's not the government, it's not Centrelink, it's not the ATO. They're getting the power companies to do it before it gets to you, because otherwise, again, if it goes through you or through a third party, you're thinking you've got this extra $300 that you can put on your power bill and then spend $300 of your own hard-earned on something else. And that is the last thing the government wants. Because if inflation doesn't come down, then interest rates won't come down. If interest rates won't come down, then the government does go down. And now to a story that has everything. And a story that has everything needs just 3 words: gay book ban. Now, I've got to declare a massive interest here. Not only am I massively interested in this story, but I have a massive conflict of interest because my wife works for Equality Australia, which is the nation's premier advocacy organisation for LGBTQIA+, so many letters. But anyway, equality. They're very specific about the equality they're advocating for. Lovely bunch of people. So I happen to know about this story before everybody else did. It was one of those ones where you just think, what? A Western Sydney council, Cumberland Council, voted to ban a book on same-sex parenting from the council library. Now, that's pretty much all you need to know. You don't need to know what it says. It was perfectly fine. We're not talking porno here. We're just talking about a nice thing that says, my 2 dads, whatever. Perfectly benign. But not to Cumberland City Council or Cumberland City councillors, because despite the mayor not having any problem with the book, they voted 6-5 to ban it from the library. And this made at least one Western Sydney grandma very upset. She happened to hear about it. She's like, why are you doing that? She wasn't gay herself, but she had a daughter, I think it was, in a same-sex marriage with kids. She said, hang on a minute. Why are you banning books? Isn't that what the Nazis do? This decision to ban the book obviously caused some alarm in the LGBTQI plus community, and fair enough too. And pretty soon there was a petition to Cumberland City Council signed by about 50,000 people. So what are you doing? And indeed, when my wife first came across this story, she was like, what do we do with it? This is just nuts. This is crazy. And they kind of didn't want to, get too hysterical about it or something. It just seemed ridiculous. It seemed absurd. And for a while, it looked like I might write the story. And my wife wasn't sure what she'd sort of do with it. And then it just popped up. It started sort of circulating. Someone got a hold of it. Someone wrote a little thing. And then next thing you know, it is just going gangbusters. It is going all over, not just Sydney, not just New South Wales, but it's making headlines right around the country. I think it even made headlines overseas. Not because it's a big story, but because it's a stupid story. Because it's the sort of thing that just doesn't need to happen. And this all culminated last night, Wednesday night, with another meeting of Cumberland City Council. And this time, instead of voting 6-5 in favour of the banning the book, it voted 12-2 against the banning of the book. So suddenly all these councils, which are all for banning it just a few weeks ago, are suddenly saying, oh, no, we never said that. And I'm asking my wife, I said, why is this? She goes, I think they were just confused. Apparently the first motion was so confusing that a lot of them didn't actually quite realise what they were voting for. It's put to them as, this is a terrible threat to our children and it's sexualising our children, or, it's going to poison and corrupt their innocent little minds or whatever it was. But what was pretty clear is that they hadn't actually read the book or they didn't know the contents of the book. So it goes from being this really tight vote in which even the mayor, again, didn't want to see the book banned, but 6-5, can't argue with democracy. Suddenly there's another council meeting and it's 12-2 against the banning of the book. Sanity prevails. But in the meantime, you've got huge groups of protesters from both sides screaming at each other outside this marathon council meeting that goes for hours and hours, all over the banning of this one little book from a council library. And they're screaming, the pro-LGBTQI, they're screaming bigots. And then you've got the protesters who are in favour of the book ban, who of course believe in free speech for everything else. When it's them who are being censored, when they want to say something on Twitter, free speech. But no, Free speech never counts when it's something they disagree with. But anyway, so they're there jumping up and down, saying horrible words, worse than bigot. And so you've got all these people screaming at each other, right? Council meeting that's gone on for hours. You've got councillors saying, you have just made this Western Sydney Council the laughing stock of the world. People are laughing. It's going to take us years to recover from this. It's just embarrassing. You made us look like Springfield from The Simpsons. That's kind of true. They're right. All because of this one crazy crusade against this one little book. And the Daily Telegraph, God bless it, what a fine newspaper that is, revealed perhaps the most important fact about this entire story, is that council wasn't voting on whether or not this book should come along and be stocked in the library. The book had been in the library for 5 years, just sitting there for 5 years. And you know how many times someone had borrowed it in those 5 years? Once. Well, that's it for the very first episode of The Real Story. Hope you loved it. If you did or if you didn't, send us an email, therealstory@novapodcasts.com.au. I'd love to hear what you think. I'd love to know what you would like us to get into in the weeks to come. Any criticisms, any feedback, any fawning praise is particularly appreciated. I want this to be as much about you as it is about me. So send us an email, therealstory@novapodcasts.com.au. And I'll see you next week.